So as most of you probably know, Google Analytics has recently switched over to Google Analytics 4. You don't have to switch over to it yet, but soon you will. What existed before was called Universal Analytics. I prefaced this whole conversation that way because we're going to focus on Google Analytics 4, because that's what you will start using. If you're familiar with Universal Analytics, just know this, two things. The UI has changed and the terms have changed. So there are things related to fields and mapping and just general terminology that has shifted, and you'll just have to Google it, but it's all Googleable. So I sent in advance, obviously, a UI overview video, because what I don't care really too much today about is getting into the weeds with like what all the terms mean and the entire layout of the UI. So we went over that at length with Google Search Console, because every single thing we talked about in our GSC training is hyper relevant when we get into SEMrush next week. So I wanted to like really establish the fluency of all of those different fields and parameters and what things are called, because the key is Google Search Console establishes like this lexicon of reference language to the various parameters of search that you pretty much have to know in order to use any SEO tools. So it was like incredibly important that we really like nail that and understand it thoroughly before we move into any other tools. But for Google Analytics, it's a little different. So same, but different. There are going to be different ways that search tools use similar data, and much of the data that you can extract from Google Analytics will also be available on a CMS. So for instance, if you use HubSpot or WordPress or something like that, you'll almost always be able to see things like behavior metrics, time on page, right? What forms people are filling out, things like that. So that doesn't make Google Analytics redundant, because we'll see in a second, Google Analytics gives you usually a far more sophisticated ability to dive in to behavioral and on-site metrics than a CMS would, but you'll see things that feel referential, and they're almost always drawing from a similar data set. So just to set, like, again, the big wide picture of it all, Google Search Console is going to talk to us about what? Like big picture, what is Google Search Console for?
It shows you data on how you're ranking in Google and how people are attracted to your site pages.
Site performance and search performance.
Good job, Grant.
I have in my notes from last week.
Exactly. So Google Search Console is all about exactly what they both said, site performance and search. So if you want to find keywords, you're going to look on Google Search Console. If you want to find out why your website isn't indexing web pages, Google Search Console. Conversely, Google Analytics is about what happens, how people are getting, what's attracting people to your website, like how people are getting to your website, traffic, and how they behave when they get there. So there's tons of metrics around user behavior. Okay, so just like keep those two big buckets and categories in your mind, because those are the two tools you use and those are the two places you need to go to find it. Okay, so I have a little agenda, so we'll just roll through it. Like I said, I want to talk about the UI at a really, really high level, and then we're just going to do a quick look at it exercise like we did last week, where I'll pull up a screen in Google Analytics, and then you just go find stuff, type it in. So again, it's just like embedding, kind of creating that familiarity. So I will go through a Google Analytics 4 that's been pretty well set up. It does have some customizations. You're not going to find a Google Analytics 4 that doesn't, because Google Analytics 4 is supposed to be customized, and you'll see that in a second. We're going to focus a lot on how to set up GA4, because you're going to have clients who ask you to, hopefully, or you're going to be doing it for your own website, and you're going to need to learn how to do it. So just like any other platform, you've got a homepage dashboard. All of these widgets have various metrics around how your site is performing, right? So it's just going to give us very high level users, event count, engagement time, and then it gives a real-time widget, okay? You've got your geographic parameters, you've got your sessions by channel, you've got your pages and how those pages are performing. And then some of these features are new. You might recognize insights from Universal Analytics, but it is one of the pieces that has been pretty significantly changed. So you've got home reports is next. I'm literally going to fly through this. So if you are like, use the video I sent earlier today, and she'll go through it a lot slower. All right, in reports, you're going to have the report snapshot. So if you're familiar with analytic or with Universal, you know that reports breakdown happened over here. Now it happens inside. So if you're like, where's my acquisition, right? Acquisition is inside reports. Okay, all of these before were pulled out into the side menu. Now they're all embedded in here. So you're going to have all the regular reports that you're familiar with from Google Analytics, which is an expanded amount of widgets than you saw on the dashboard, and basically addresses the same things. And then you've got your acquisition. So we'll go into detail about acquisition in a few minutes because it's the thing you'll probably use GA4 the most. But basically it tells you where users come from. So we'll just look at it together for a second. Where users come from via channel, where users come from via search, how many users are on your site right now, all that kind of thing. Okay. You've got engagement. So engagement is probably the second most popular reason people use Google Analytics ever, because it tells you how people behave when they're on your site. So acquisition, how are you getting them? And then engagement, what are they doing when they get there? Okay, so that's going to include all the basic parameters of engaged sessions per user, average engagement time. We'll look at the metrics for that in a second. And then this is where Google Analytics 4 has some enhanced data capabilities that we'll look at when we go to the setup. And we kind of look at how do you configure these modules? How do you pick the different dimensions of the data that you want to view? How do you want to compare those dimensions to each other? So this is kind of talking about retention. We're talking about stickiness by channel. We're talking about activity over time, some various things like that. So within engagement, you're also going to talk about events, conversions, pages and screens, and landing pages. And again, we'll go into this in more detail. I just want to expose you all to it like one time, and then we'll go back. And then monetization. So if you run ads and you have a PPC team or you have PPC people, they'll probably use Google Analytics as a way to track ad performance. So Google Search Console kind of exists in the world of search over here, but Google Ads and Google Analytics are very closely connected. They are used really like symbiotically in order to create and execute ad strategies. And that's pretty much it. Then you've got users, demographics, and then the technology. So demographics, where are they in the world? And then you've got a lot more niche data around demographics like male, female, age, city, et cetera. And then tech overview. So you can look at what devices are these people coming on. So as you can imagine, all of that data is really useful to a marketer as you consider like, how are we optimizing our website for the kinds of people who come to our website? Who's coming to our website most often? What are they doing when they get there? All the important things that you need to know in order to make strategic decisions. Does anybody have any like, what is this kind of questions? Okay. So let's do a little exercise. All right. So I'm going to drop this just like we did last week. I'm going to drop the link to this spreadsheet in the chat. And then, so y'all all pull it up on your screens if you can. And then I'm going to pull up I'm going to pull up the Google Analytics 4 view and then just drop the data. So I did this out of order on purpose. So it's a little bit difficult. If you notice, when we did Google Search Console, right, we looked at a dimension and data. Google Analytics is more complex in that, if you'll notice right away, we have a dimension and data. We've got like a category of data of acquisitions. This is an acquisition data pool. We've got a category of the type of acquisition. Then we've got dimensions, multiple dimensions per channel, which is part of the reason that Google Analytics is useful, but it's also part of the challenge of like learning what all of those things mean and where to find them. All right, so I will pull this up and I'm going to go to the acquisition overview. And just like we did in Google Search Console, what's the first thing we have to check anytime we're pulling data on any of these platforms?
Date range.
Date range, yes. So check yourself before you wreck yourself and do a bunch of work that means nothing. All right, so let's do custom. We'll do December. You want to do December? Okay. All right, does everybody have the spreadsheet? Do you have edit access?
I don't see it.
Is it in the chat?
No.
Oh, I put it to waiting room participants, which is nobody. Hold on. Everyone in the meeting, let's try again. All right, let me know if you can get it.
Got it.
All right, so I'm going to go to user acquisition. And I'll zoom in a little bit. You don't need the line graph. So look at the chart and then fill in what you can find on the spreadsheet. I'll give you like 2 minutes. If anybody's lacking access or view, let me know.
Are we just filling it in as a big group?
Yeah, so just
Okay.
any data you can find, fill it in. And if somebody's already got one, try another one. The goal of this is just to get your eyes to look at all the different pieces. All right, are we done? How do we do? Good job, guys. All right, so you looked at it, your eyeballs saw it. Basically, let's just talk through it really quick. I don't know why I had two open. So we've got all the different categories, right? Which is all of our channels on the left. Does anybody have any questions about what these categories are? I don't feel like I need to go through and explain them, but please tell me if I do. All right, so let's do a really easy quiz. So what is the second best average engagement time?
Display? Question mark?
Referrals.
Oh, no.
Referrals, yeah. No problem. Okay. What is the highest, let's softball. What is the highest engagement rate?
Email.
Okay. What's driving the most event counts?
Organic search.
Yep. As you'd expect. All right. And what has the lowest amount of new users?
Social.
Social.
So right away, if you walked in, looked at this report and know nothing about this company, what would you assume makes them the most money? Makes them the most money, not gets them the most traffic. You're allowed to guess.
Can you like zoom in a little bit? Is that something we can do? I can't read any of these numbers. I'm just over here like right up in my camera. Sorry, guys. Would it be email?
Email?
Organic search.
I was gonna guess search because of event count. If the event count is like a sale, I don't know.
I would say organic search because of the engaged sessions. It's significantly higher than any of the other metrics.
Well, yeah, and the engagement rate on email is huge too.
Mm-hmm.
Is event count similar to goal completions?
It can be. That's a very smart question. Without the customization, without knowing why they've set up customized parameters the way they have, we can't say with certainty what their events mean. So both Taylor and Ross, you both caught on to that. Okay, so that's just like a, let's look at it. That's one data set in this platform that can start to give us clues about how this company functions and about how this company is making money based on how they're acquiring people on their website, right? Very, very simple. So obviously it gets far more complex. So let's talk about a little bit more of the complex part. Okay, so in GA4, we have the ability to set up, just like I said, a lot of customized elements. And I'm going to try to find it. My cat is about to knock over my lamp. If we go into configuration, we have the ability to set up a great number of parameters. Now, some of these are familiar to you if you're familiar with universal analytics, right? Some of these are the same. But what I want to do, instead of like looking at the general dashboard, which is so simplistic, I want to look at this, because I think my goal today is, yes, for you to understand basically the kind of data and then how you need to read the data on Google Analytics. But I also want you to understand the capabilities of GA4. So you can Google UI, you can Google what all the terms mean and stuff like that. Like, I don't feel like that's a great use of our time. So my thought is like, let's go into how you can set this up in order to see things and really like use it as a biz dev tool to consider like, what are the quality of leads? Because you can use GA4 for lead scoring. You can use it for attribution modeling. Like, that is the power of this version of Google Analytics, which is what makes it significantly more useful to us. Okay. So speaking of events, we can look at in Google Analytics 4, you can go in and you can set up different events. So immediately this should make you think of lead scoring. So if you're looking at MQLs or SQLs in your greater business development system, you're going to be measuring the quality of those leads based on their behavior. Google Analytics tracks that behavior already. So you can associate that tracked behavior with metrics that matter to you. Okay. So for instance, this one had, and there's like default, like these are probably all defaults, but you can customize. How do I get rid of this thing? There. So you can actually see create event. Okay. So what you can do is you can go in and you can say, all right, the things that we care about measuring on our website include, right? You always want clicks. You always want to know like how many people are clicking, obviously, on our website. First visit is a big one, right? If you think about even building a funnel and doing any kind of lead scoring, you want to know, has this person come to our website once, or has this person come to our website 3 times? Which is a more viable possible lead?
The person who came 3 times.
We want to know page view. We want to know how many pages they visited, right? So what is bounce rate? What does that mean?
When someone comes to your website and doesn't visit any other pages and just leaves.
Good. I know these are obvious questions, but they remind you that you exist in this conversation too. So this is the opposite of a bounce rate, right? If they've gone to more than one page. Google Search Console is not going to tell you pages per visit, I don't think, but this is where you would go. That's a behavioral metric. And not only do you want to know that they went to more than one page, you can find out which pages they went to, right? Jenna and I just talked through this afternoon. Like, if they come through the blog, they are most likely to go to this page second. They're most likely to go to this page next. Like, you can get that granular with tracking the customer journey, and you can set up the parameters in here that automate the tracking for you. So that's not like something you have to buy a third-party tool for. There are capabilities in here for doing it. All right. So first visit, page view, scroll. Obviously, you want to know if they've gone down, session start, view search results, things like that. So let's go into create event and just kind of look. You can go in and create custom events. And basically, we won't do it here, but for real, because this is a live GA4. But basically what you can do is you could say, like, if somebody does this, and here's a bunch of them, right? So this would be great for an e-com website, these specific events, right? If somebody adds something to the cart, if they add something to their wish list, if they begin checkout, right? There's all kinds of parameters behaviorally that you would want to track. How many people not just came to our website, but how many people added their shipping info, added payment info, things like that. Okay. Can you think of things for like a business website that would be useful for you to track that is not an e-com? Because none of y'all are in e-com.
Form fills.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say.
Lead magnet downloads. Now, again, we already said this. Most of this data is also going to be tracked by your CMS. But if you want to bundle all behavioral data points that you're tracking for your entire website, there are going to be things that probably only GA tracks. So you might, if it's this easy, click, value, done, you might as well, right? You might as well set it up to say, like, I want to map every touch point in the customer journey, every place they could possibly click, everything they could possibly download or do. And then you would go in and you would create, and you can create different conditions, right? So you create the parameter equals, does not equal, contains, starts with, ends with. Okay. So you do all these triggers. You would have to look into this a little bit to customize it for yourself, for your own website. But that's a really, really powerful tool. So you can go and you can create events, and then it would add it to this list. And then it would add it to all your little dashboards that we just looked at, right? All the different report views and things like that. You would be able to track what's happening. And then you could start to evaluate based on that mapping journey, is a second page view that important, or is it not, right? Is a visit to our contact page as valuable as we think it is, right? Okay, we're driving, and this is where you start to get more complex. We're driving 800 hits a month to this specific blog, and that blog has never, somebody visiting that blog has never clicked to download the lead magnet that's on that page, right? Like you start to see where you think you have this like idea that things are working because of certain data points, but you have to build the whole picture so that you actually understand what's driving business, what's driving revenue, and what isn't. All right, let's keep trucking through these. So conversion is obviously a big one. This is where you can go in and you can input all of your like forms if you wanted to. More likely you're just going to say like your contact form or something, because that'll probably contribute to your lead score more than others, but you can go through and obviously do as much as you want. And then you just mark it as a conversion point. You can assign dollar value to it. Again, y'all aren't in e-com, so this level of granular is probably not as big of a deal, but it is possible to do, and you might as well know it can do it. Okay. And then audiences. So this is interesting. This and custom definitions are two things that have changed a little after Universal sunset. So audiences are kind of interesting. We talk about audience segmentation all the time, and very few of us get beyond the point of creating an ICP and being like, here's Jeff, the 36-year-old Latin American man in Chicago who has 2 kids. Like, we fill in all this like color for our ICPs, and then we don't think about like, okay, but like behaviorally, we think about how they act outside our website, and we paint the entire picture of like, they're on these social networks and they check their email this many times a day. But like, we don't often think about how does an ICP behave on our own website? And that's actually a really, really important metric, right? Like, is that Jeff guy compared to your Darcy ICP more likely to download the lead magnet for 10 steps to filing your taxes early, right? Like we have to start, if you want to go into a really sophisticated approach with how you're tailoring your website copy and driving the customer journey, you need to start thinking about how you're constructing the objective parameters around your ICP and then measuring how they perform on your website. Again, the whole point of GA4 is to analyze how people behave on your website. And setting these unique custom parameters when you go in to create is what's going to give you the objective criteria against which to measure the success or failure of those efforts. Okay, so there's lots of ways. This is a little more complex than our conversation today, but basically you'll go in, you can set different conditions. Okay. So you could say like, if somebody comes from this certain Google ad we want that. And then you can include 6 or 8 different, you can do and or, right? Contingency trees. You can do a lot of logic. Okay. But then basically you could say like, okay, if this person comes to this ad and then they go to this page and then they download this thing, this I want to track, right? I want to know, and I want to be notified of how many people took that path. So, and this is really important to like justify funnel building. So if you spend a whole bunch of time and effort building a funnel, and then you never track how it performs like this for a specific audience, you've missed a huge opportunity to understand what's going on your website and whether or not those efforts are working. You can also do exclusions like you can in any kind of data stream. So if you're interested in building a custom audience and then looking at how that audience is acting specifically on your website, that's where you would do it. Any questions about that? I know we can't go real deep because it's beyond the scope of the combo, but okay. All right, next is custom dimensions. So as we talked about when I just showed you that very simple spreadsheet exercise, when we were in Google Search Console, we were looking at a category and a dimension. In Google Analytics, we're looking at a category, a dimension, and a dimension. So you're looking at more than one. So if you think of it like a pivot table, you can think of it in a lot of different ways from a data viz perspective, which is why there are multiple visualization options in GA4, because the complexity of parsing out data like that requires you to look at it and be like, wait a minute, what does that mean? Right? Like compared to what? So you can even go further. So if that confuses you, good luck. You can actually go way further than that, creating your own custom dimensions. So what you could do is you could select a dimension against which you want to measure an event. So if you said like, I want to see if people who are going to this blog page fill out a form, you could go and you could set, form, blog form, whatever, name it, whatever you want. It would be an event or against an event or a user. Okay. So you could set it against an event, and then you would basically say like the first person, did they fill out the form the first time that they came to the website? Did they come from an outbound link? Were we able to UTM them into a certain way? Did they come through a certain search term? Right. So you can dive a lot deeper into how people are performing tasks or activities on your website. And then you could also measure it against user properties. So that's your like demographic data. So it would give you the ability to create custom dimensions so that you can measure and track more things. Does anybody else feel scared about how much the internet knows about what you do when you go to a website? You're going to think twice before abandoning a shopping cart again, aren't you? They know. All right. The last things we'll just look at really quickly is some of the data settings. So you can store data in a specific way. This is one of those things where you kind of don't notice it's gone until it's gone, and then you can't ever get it back. So it's just one of those settings that you have to like pay attention to, because if you don't have it set for a lengthy enough time and then you don't regularly back it up, you'll lose it. And then you can do different filters. So for instance, if you don't want to have any like staged content involved in your data pull. So remember, your Google Analytics code is installed in the head of your website. So everything that's on your website is up for grabs unless you exclude it. So just making sure you're going through, like if you're doing a ton of staging, like if you're doing a whole website redo and you're doing it staged, okay, your dev staged it, then they move it over to your website before final review. All that content, unless you exclude it, would be part of this, which obviously you don't want it to, because your data would go into the crapper and then you'd be like, what happened to my website? Like, well, and then data import. So this would probably be for somebody who's an actual data expert on your team to use, but you can actually bring data from external sources. So for instance, if you're using like a really heavy duty SEO tool, if you're using a third-party ad system, like not Google Ads, but a different PPC system, and you want that data in here, you can pull it in. So lots of options. There are tons and tons of resources because of how passionate people are about the fact that Universal Analytics is sunsetting. There's a lot of like defense from Google of like why we're doing this, which means they've also created a lot of training materials. So you can definitely Google any and all of this, but I would recommend you go touch each one of these things. So if you oversee any Google Analytics accounts, go in here, go into the admin settings, and just play around with it. See what is set up by default that you might not want, and see what else you might want that is not set up. Any questions?
Yeah, this might be a dumb one. Is there any reason not to get set up with this Google Analytics 4?
You won't have a choice.
Okay, because I mean, I'm looking at Modus's and I'm like, I want to create a new Google Analytics 4 property. I'm like, do I?
You want to do it before you have to.
Yeah, okay.
And you will have to. So let's see, when is?
I think it's July.
Yeah, July. So
And would there be hazard in waiting until it just does it itself, or just to get ahead of the jump kind of thing?
I mean, if you literally wait until that date, beyond missing out on
all the, the advanced stuff already.
Everything will be default. Yeah, I mean, most people have been in it for at least 6 months already. So yeah.
Is there something too, like they're going to wipe your data after a certain period of time too, or?
I mean, so if you remember when we were in that settings, you choose how often your data is backed up. So if you look at data retention, so your data is lost after whatever period you have anyway. So, you're not going to get back up from like your event data, your user data. You've got to export that and back it up yourself. And you can have a developer help you do that.
So we should run an export if we're not moved to GA4. We should run an export of our data.
I would, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And then it'll stop processing new data on that date. So any Universal Analytics account will be totally empty of data starting July 1st or whatever.
Okay.
So there's a risk there, obviously, of just totally losing. And the problem is like, people are like, oh, well, it's not that big of a deal. I'll just like set it up, a couple days later. The problem is like everything we do in search is like month over month data, year over year data. Like if you have an unexplained glitch in your data, like you're totally screwed, because then all of your benchmarking is, it's destroyed, diluted. There's another D word I'm thinking. Distorted. That's the word I'm thinking. It's all going to be distorted because you're going to have like a weird gap that you're like, oh, damn it, so it's just better to get ahead of it. Okay. And it's easier to eat the elephant a bite at a time, Caitlin, than to be like, oh, I have to eat this elephant for dinner on July 1st. All right. So we talked about how, in the whole point of Google Analytics tell us how people are getting to the website, how they're acting when they get there. I alluded to the idea of an ideal client profile, and that much of the way that we architect these avatars, these would-be customers, is kind of psychographic, right? We're using how we assume people behave, and then we're kind of fleshing them out. A lot of times we do that in a very artistic way, right? And we may have some data inform it, but our data could be inaccurate, right? We're always going to make wrongful assumptions, which is why data is so important. So I thought it would be cool let's go together and just kind of have an intellectual exercise of looking at the kind of users who are visiting this site, and you tell me who you think they are, and what kind of people you think they are, and what they might be interested in. And let's go to acquisition. Am I in acquisition overview? One second. And we'll just kind of discuss it together, because that's the kind of conversation that you would want to have as you look at this data, with anybody in leadership, with yourself as a marketing leader, to be able to extrapolate the data and make sense of it. I guess it doesn't matter about the date range. And then tell us what it means, right? So we know what this says. This diagnoses the user behavior on this website. But what does it mean? What does it mean about who's coming to this website? Who are they? And what are they looking for? Can the data tell us that story? So let's talk through that. And you can tell me to move around if you need me to, if you see something that you think you need to know. There are no right or wrong answers. This is truly hypothetical.
Do you get to know what this company is, or can I Google it? Am I allowed to do that?
It's a concrete resurfacing company.
Oh,
Foundation repair.
so their customers are worried people.
It's a local company. Yep.
They're stressed out.
It's local-ish. To be fair, it's actually a huge company.
Yeah, I was gonna say their customers or their visitors are seeming like they're problem aware because they're coming from search, which means they're probably searching for a question or for the service specifically or direct. So
Yeah,
that's
like, my foundation is cracked. What do I do?
Yeah, first time home buyer is what it screams to me. That typically, if you have this type of issue and you have experienced it before, you probably have somebody that you go to, and you're not going to somebody that you don't know. So if it's coming through organic search, that's where my mind goes immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Can we see what kind of things they're searching?
Yep.
So they're probably like homeowners or business owners or landlords.
Landlords, yeah.
That space. Sagging floors, yeah. They're like, help my sagging floor.
Oh, so people who own older homes is probably
Mhm.
what this has too.
Which, if we make the intellectual leap, agrees with Mark. Because who buys older homes?
Yeah, first time home buyers.
The fact that one of the top ones is waterproofing and basement alludes to the fact that they are not, or that they're going to be in a certain geographic area because we don't have basements in the South.
Or on the
And
west
whole
coast.
home dehumidifiers.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
with crawl spaces, spray foam. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
These
So
are
I'm
like trigger words.
thinking this is probably Midwest to Northeast if I'm guessing.
I feel very triggered by these.
Gold star, Mark. Gold star.
What are French drains?
Obviously not a good waterproofing option.
what I have half dug in my backyard right now.
All right, let's go back. What else do we think we know about them? So do you remember where we could find additional information? Over on the left,
Engagement?
Demographics.
User acquisition.
Oh, demographics right there.
Haha, good job.
Oh,
I was trying to get you to tell me. Look at this beauty.
Oh, they're in Chicago.
Midwest.
That's what it looks like. Well, Elk Grove Village is very specific.
This surprises me. What do you think surprises me?
I don't know. I feel like I could have guessed this.
The 35 to 44?
Can you zoom out just a little bit, Joy? I'm missing the right side of the screen.
That's not the part that surprised me, actually. Our widgets are going to shift.
I don't know.
The gender.
Yes.
I don't
Why?
that doesn't surprise me.
No.
Who solves home issues?
Males.
A man.
Really?
Yeah.
That is not my paradigm.
Well, in the Midwest, they do.
Yeah.
That's mostly. That's the Midwest. That's like a very clear indicator. That's where that is.
Well, it's interesting. I've had a lot of customers that mentioned Elk Grove Village specifically. It is a heavily, it's a very ethnic based community. You get a lot of Russians and Eastern Europeans in that area. So I could see where that might be, potentially part of the demographic there that's not showing here. So.
Interesting.
Interest is interesting.
What do you think? Sorry.
The interest section.
Uh-huh.
It's like, what are these people interested in?
I mean, it checks out. I feel like I'm looking at my dad. So like my dad's looking how to resolve sagging floors. He's not a first time home buyer, but like he's trying to figure out how to fix foundations that have cracked because of weather changes and water issues and dehumidifying crawl spaces and basements and that sort of stuff. And he's also into financing and like banking stuff. So how do I fund my repairs? Food dining. No, that's mom got onto the Google by accident on dad's account. That's what. Yeah, technology, vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
where is the traffic coming from? I think that would be a pretty decent lead indicator. If it's coming from Facebook, we know that it's.
Where would I find that?
From traffic acquisition.
Good job.
The fact that paid search is so low is actually kind of cool because people are just, they don't need to put out money, I guess. People need them.
Would you be surprised to know? Wait, I can't say that. Dang it. It's a really salient point. I can't tell you. Okay.
Oh, you left me hanging on the edge.
I know, it's very annoying. I'll slack it to you. Okay. All right. Yeah, interesting. Okay. So after looking at that for 5 minutes, do you feel like you have an understanding of how you would communicate to somebody? Do you understand who's coming to this website, why they're coming, and how you could talk to them? At least clues. Do you feel like you have clues?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know that they would need, they need maybe a high level answer when they're first searching. They don't need something super in depth and technical. Like, can you fix this? Yes, we can.
Mm-hmm.
Here's how we do it. This is what it's going to cost.
Yeah. Based on some of the DIY stuff, it also screams that, these are failed DIYers that are realizing that they're in over their heads.
Good point. Spray foam in my bathtub.
Uh-huh.
Please help.
You think we could just throw some concrete in this crack? Yeah, that's fine.
A little bit of spackle.
Yeah. There's a foam now that you can blast in between cracks like that, and it allows for flexing. It may be a whole better option than paying for a brand new foundation. I don't know. I'm just saying.
Good thing you're not in sales for this company. Although I guess if they do repair, it's not like they do construction and they're selling it.
Probably what they use.
Yeah, it's probably true. Okay, so we were going to go through this, but I see we're a little bit short on time, and I'm going to make sure we connect the dot back to search, because that's kind of the whole point of this, in addition to obviously understanding the audiences and things like that. So there's an article here that kind of covers it. But basically, I would be remiss if I didn't remind you that there are numerous ways to manipulate the data in here. So if you remember last week, we pulled the data off of Google Search Console into a spreadsheet, and then we played with it. Right. And when we played with it and manipulated it, we started seeing a different story. So when we had logged in the first time, we kind of all had this impression that certain pages were driving traffic, that certain pages were really valuable, that certain key phrase families were like the MVPs. And after manipulating the data, it kind of became clear that our initial assumptions were flawed, which is the importance of handling data, right? So yes, there are a million tools that can automate every single leg of the data journey, but your manipulation of it and interaction with it is what brings out the truth, because the truth is there, but the truth is not obvious. And almost always, if you don't know what you're doing, you get an incomplete picture. And so it's just really, really important that you start to think about ways to manipulate data and use data. And I'm using the word manipulate in the sense of like to move it around, right? Not to make a lie out of it. I don't know if there's like an impression about that word. So the idea, like, move it around, use it in different ways, put it in different contexts, compare it to different things. So I'll just like literally in 3 minutes show you a couple of things here. You can do a lot of comparison data. If you remember on Google Search Console, we were able to like take the line graph and like bump it in a comparison 30 over 30, right? With date range comparisons and things like that. You can do similar things in here, but probably even more complex because you have multiple dimensions to play with. You can get a little crazy, but it is kind of awesome to look at the way you can build comparisons. So for instance, if we wanted to include age and only look at people who are in the 35 through 44, oh, sorry, I didn't click here. We would be able to just see data like that, comparing how all of our users behave and our 35 through 44. So what that would tell us is that compared to all users on the website, 35 to 44 had a very small amount of organic search. So where are they coming from? Where are they coming they might not have the parameters set up to track this. Okay, so then we could look at all users against, gender. We could look at host. We could look at page path, right? We could look at landing page and query string, which is what we were just looking at when we said what pages are they going to? Okay, so that's landing page and query string. We could look at that and say compared to, let's just do it. So if we wanted to pick which one, you want sagging floors? Let's look at sagging floors because it's fun. All right. And then we would set this here and we would say, okay, compared to every page on the website, sagging floors is contributing to this much organic search, this many users from direct, this many users. Okay. So nobody in the email is getting to the sagging floors, right? But lots of people are getting there from organic search, a few. It's accounting for this much of our traffic. This is also obviously a powerful way. I mean, it's probably faster to look in Google Search Console to check the performance of a specific URL, but you can go in and compare that. So that's a very, very small taste. I linked this article in here and you can play with dimensions and you can actually download reports. So I should probably actually show you that. I assume it's all pretty obvious, but if you want to share the report, so you can share it in a link or you can download the file. So if you download a PDF, it'll immediately show you, here's a summary of the report that you just looked at. Obviously, always double check you got the date range right, double check you've got all your parameters right. And then it'll literally just pull it up like this. Okay, so this is like if you want to show your coworker, hey, I've been running this report and I'm not sure why this landing page is underperforming in direct, because landing pages should perform in direct, right? It's pretty much how they work. That kind of thing, you can easily share it like that. So that's, getting the data off of GA4 is not as imperative in my mind as getting the data off of Google Search Console, because while there are more dimensions to the data, there's less of it, right? So when you're exporting from Google Search Console, you're doing like thousands of pages or hundreds and hundreds of keywords. So at scale with that volume, you need to be able to sort it different ways. You need to be able to see, because you can't force for the trees, right? There's so much you got to get through to be able to see what's important. Here you have a clearer picture of what's important. You just need to be able to put parameters against it and compare it to the things that matter to you so that you can say like, okay, but what does that really mean for our business, right? What is really driving business? Okay. Any questions on that? I'll make sure you have access to that so you can look deeper if you're interested. And then let's just make sure we kind of circle back looking at the value of this as a tool for search. So obviously most of the URL performance and keyword performance metrics that you're going to be diving into are on Google Search Console. But I will tell you with absolute confidence, the data doesn't always match. I don't know why. I'm not intelligent enough. I'm not educated enough. Like, I don't know why, but some Google Search Console, Brianna and I just dealt with this. We had like 2 header codes installed somehow, and her data was showing like what, Brianna, like 6 contacts different. It was like an irritatingly minuscule difference, but it was different. Like the data she saw and the data I saw, and we were like on it at the same time, looking at the same screen. So that can become a thing. So whether it's as a confirmation point to like, confirm that the data you had in GSC is accurate, or whether it's just to do an extra exploration, see it in a different way. There are some ways to consider, obviously, how, your website's performing based on what GA4 is telling you. What's the most obvious one? I'll highlight it for you.
Everyone's coming from organic search. Most people.
Right. So we've got new users and we've got sessions, and the vast majority of what's working for this client is organic search. It's because they're Franco's client and he's a genius. We can look at Google Ads, but let's look at the 2 organic. So when you are in acquisition, I'm in acquisition overview, and there's 2 big buckets of data that are going to relate back to organic search traffic. Obviously, your traffic number, right? But then you've got your traffic number by page. So we'll just click in and look at that real quick. And this is going to tell you how these specific landing pages and query string is just the URL, how it's performing over time. Okay. And you can funnel this data. If you notice, there's a customization in here that's funneling the data specifically. We won't get into it, but basically this will tell you based on organic, here's your clicks, here's your impressions, here's your CTR, and here's your average position on Google. This is a number that's going to change, right? Month over month. This is probably the only metric that I want you to look at and like burn into your brain for us next week, because when we get into SEMrush, position tracking is huge to prove your worth as an SEO professional, right? You have to be able to prove we were at 27 and now we're at 7. And I did that. The only way to do that is if you're actually tracking these numbers. And because they're updated live in real time, you have to pull it off and put it in a static report every month. You can go back. It's a huge pain. So just that's my plug for like, do the report. I don't care. I know it's manual and nobody likes to do it. I just want to build a dashboard, but do the report so you have a static reference point that you can say like, in July, we were at position 38 for sagging floors. And now we're at position 22 because we did this topic cluster, right? So that's kind of something you want to look at. I went on a real tangent there. Okay, hold on. Let's go back. It's a big deal to me. All right. So that was organic search traffic by landing page. And then we have search queries. So again, you're probably not going to use this as like your primary source of information, but what this will do is break down in 4 different metrics, including average position for a key word or a key phrase, which is really powerful data, right? To say, okay, we're at a position 1. Our entire website is about 30, right? Google search average position, SERP. But for our name, we're number 1. For Michigan basement, we're hovering between 1 and 2. For spray foam crawl space, they're at number 1. Paying attention to where those exact keywords, as you remember, Google Search Console doesn't deliver that quite so cleanly. It tells you what drove the most clicks, and it will tell you position if you pull off the data and filter it according to that. But this is like a really easy way. So if somebody you work for is like, hey, are we ranking number 1 for agriculture technology? You could go pull this up and say, no, we're number 37, or yes, we're number 1. Like, just gives you like a 2-click way to find out that information really easily. So then if you're doing keyword tracking and things like that, you've got a really nice, easy way to look at it. Any questions? Okay, well, those were the 2 SEO dots that I wanted to connect. So let's just I'm trying to end a little bit early so we have a minute to ask questions, because I know we ran right up to time last week. As we look at the big picture of all that, what comes to mind? What do you think is going to be hard? What do you think comes super naturally? Yeah. Tiffany, do you guys have GA4 set up?
Yes.
I assumed.
We have all the tools: SEMrush, GA4, Search Console, all the things, HubSpot.
Ross, Tiffany works at Playware.
Oh, hey, Tiffany.
Hi.
I think overall GA4 is maybe like a little less intuitive than Google Analytics Universal was. So it'll take a little bit of getting used to, but that's why I think it's important to start now and not wait until July the 1st, as you said, and then, all of a sudden you're in a black hole and you have to figure it out. So yeah, this has been like a timely, useful training. And I know I've been putting off transitioning a couple of my clients to GA4. So I feel better equipped to do it now. So thank you.
It's a bit of a physician heal thyself thing, because I don't even think our website's hooked up to Ghost Analytics. But all of our clients are, and it's very clean. Is there any area that we went through or covered that you're like, that you want me to put more resources together? And you don't have to answer in front of the group if you don't want to, just Slack me or email me. Because there's like 3 really good YouTube channels that have been covering like a lot of the minutia really well, and some other resources we can pull in if you want to look at a specific area more.
The create event section was kind of like for me, but I don't know, would that ever be like super relevant, helpful, or that like what would we be required to do that for SEO very often, or is it mainly for like PPC?
You will now, because
Okay,
now I want you to.
That's the only part that was really like what for me.
And maybe you and I can do it together for a client at some point, and then we can like look at those parameters.
Okay.
Yeah. One of the things, and I might even send it to you guys, I'm trying to think, like we have an SOP for Google Data Studio builds that covers like defining all of the data points out of GSC and GA really, really thoroughly, of like, here's what the data is, here's the table, here's the ideal visualization for it, kind of thing, because we use it to build Data Studio dashboards. I can send that to you if it helps like break down, because data can be intimidating, but it's just information and it's just called a certain thing. So once you like get familiar, you know, it's not rocket science. Although I guess rocket science probably uses a lot of data. Anything else, Mark?
No.
You have nothing to publicly disagree with me about?
Nope, nothing to publicly disagree with you about. I've had a couple of clients transition over to it, so it's fairly familiar. So nothing too scary. I agree. The event piece is the only thing that on a customer by customer basis, that's a bit of a challenge, because if they treat it differently than somebody else that you're not used to it, it can be a bit of a task, but
yeah. Cool beans. All right. Well, thanks for coming, everybody. This is great. I'll do like a follow-up email again with some resources and stuff. And then next week we'll dive into SEMrush, which is basically like an aggregating tool for all the above. But we're going to go over some specific tasks and functions of the tool. So I think that'll be helpful. And I appreciate all you guys. Have a good evening or day or whatever time it is, wherever you are.
Thanks, Joy.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Joy.
Talk soon. Bye.